Hey everyone, I'm back with another video. This one is called 6 Tips for Teaching on Zoom. Many of us will be teaching remotely again in the fall semester, so I thought I would put some tips together in the hopes that it's helpful to you as you think about how to design your courses for the fall. So my first tip is to encourage your students to come on camera, but not to require it. And I know this is a bit of a controversial one. Some might disagree with me, and that's okay. If you've had really great success mandating that your students come on camera, please feel free to share your experiences in the comments below. But I personally don't think that that students should be required to come on camera. Think about like all the meetings that we've had, and there are days where I just don't want to be on camera. There are days I am not like in the mood to just let the world into my home. I don't have a separate home office, so there are just some days where I just don't. I'm just not feeling it, and it takes a lot of energy to just be on screen constantly. It's draining. We find that we're constantly like looking at ourselves, which is also distracting. So, and if you think about our students, many of them are zooming in from their bedrooms, and that's a really private space, and they might not want to show that area, and I think we should respect that. So that's my first tip. I have 2 and 3 grouped together. My second tip is to pause every few minutes to ask questions and check the chat box. In this weird contrived like online environment where we're zooming with each other for class, there's only so much information that students can absorb at once from a talking head. So I try to make sure that I stop every few minutes, pause, ask for questions, look at the chat box, and just see if anyone has typed in any questions. Not all students are comfortable coming on the mic and speaking in that kind of environment, or even in a regular class. So that leads me to number 3. You want to wait longer than normal for them to respond. Most of the students are going to be muted, so if they do want to answer your question, give them a few seconds to unmute themselves, or give them half a minute or so to type their questions into the chat box. I know that as a student myself right now, I'm in a doctoral program, and our classes are also on Zoom, and sometimes the instructor will ask, like, are there any questions? No, great, let's move on. And it's we barely have time to formulate our thoughts, and not all students are comfortable butting in and saying, hey, hold on a second, let me ask my question. So it might feel awkward because there's silence and you're asking them if they need any help or if they have questions, and you might not hear anything for 30 seconds, but I would still recommend just waiting and just making sure that anyone who wants to ask a question has that opportunity. My tip number 4, use a flipped classroom model. So this has worked well for me during the second half of this last semester, where we had to quickly transition. So if you don't know what a flipped classroom is, it's when you have students read through and study the material before it's been introduced in class. And then when you come together for class time, for a synchronous session, you have a discussion on that material. So for my class, there's a lot of reading and research. So what I will do is have them do some of the readings ahead of time, or I'll make a video with some content and explain some things that they can watch ahead of time. And then when we come together for class, I make sure I have some specific questions for them, and I'll ask those questions, and then we have a class discussion. Um, I found that that's worked better than just trying to present a lecture, because it's really hard to keep a student's attention, especially for more than like 15 or 20 minutes, and no one really wants to listen to someone just talk and talk online. So by having these discussion questions ready and having them engage with each other, I think it's a better classroom experience. And on Zoom, it's really easy to group students into smaller groups. Did I say that right? It's easy to group students into groups. Um, and I can't really show you that because I'm not in a live class right now, but if you go to the settings on your Zoom, you'll see that you can randomly assign students into groups of 3, 4, 5, whatever you'd like, and then they'll be grouped together, and then you can jump in on each group. So that's what I would do. I would have them discuss for not long, maybe 6 or 7 minutes, and I would just hop into each group and just chat with them. That way I can also have a smaller group discussion with them, and that has worked really well. This image is from a website called Teach Thought, and I'll link it in the description below, but it just has some pros and cons of a flipped classroom. And I think for us, what we need to be, what we need to be more mindful of is that it does require that students have devices, and that they're able to access their materials online. So it's just something to be mindful of when you think about accessibility. Okay, so my tip number 5, try out Hypothesis. Hypothesis is a digital annotation tool. What is a digital annotation tool? I put the website link here so you can access that, but I will show you what it is on my desktop. So in my classes, we do a lot of reading, and I always assign my students annotations, right? So when they read, they need to annotate, take notes, ask questions, think critically about these issues that we're reading about. So Hypothesis is a digital annotation tool, and at my institution, we have it embedded into our learning management system, our LMS. So this is what it looks like when it's embedded into Blackboard. So you assign the student the reading in Blackboard through Hypothesis, and this is what it looks like. You can see that different students have highlighted different parts of the article, but if I open up this window here on the left, you can see where students annotated different parts of this article. And I have my students' permission to show this because, their names are here, but I think this is really helpful because the students, not only are they annotating, right, but they can see each other's annotations, and that's helpful because they can see certain things that their classmates have pointed out or commented on that they may not have necessarily thought of. So it's a good teaching tool. It's a good way for them to kind of engage in an activity kind of together, but not really. But by assigning this ahead of time, and by having the students read and annotate the articles ahead of time, again, going back to that flipped classroom, we can then use our class time, our synchronous class time, to have a discussion and to talk about these issues that we've read about. So if you don't have this embedded into your learning management system, here is the website, the homepage for Hypothesis, and they've waived the fee. There is a free version. There's also a paid version, but you see here that they've waived the fees for institutions through 2020. So here's where you can get more information about Hypothesis, and just learn more to see if that's something that you might like. Again, you don't have to have a subscription through your institution to use it, but we do have it at Montgomery College. Okay, so going back to my last tip, tip number 6. Oh, post your class recordings so students can access them later, if you're comfortable doing so. I know that there are some concerns, and some instructors might not feel comfortable with the fact that the student can have access to a class recording where, you may be showing like your face and they can hear your voice. That's not necessarily a concern for me. So it's just something to think about. And this way, if your student can't make class time, they can at least go back to the recording. The only thing is they can't necessarily see the chat but at least they can hear, you know, the discussion, and they can hear what you're explaining to the class. And also, along with this tip, here's like a 6B, I guess. When you're reading questions from the chat, I always repeat them out loud. So if a student posts a question in the chat, um, I know that the other students can see the question, but just to ensure accessibility, I'll always repeat it. So I'll just say, you know, like, okay, so-and-so is asking XYZ. That way, later for the video recording, whoever's li whoever's listening to it can also hear the question. And here's a link for how to make sure that your videos are transcribed, because Zoom can do that for you, which is great because we definitely want to follow accessibility guidelines for students. So then I have like a last like little bonus tip. I didn't want to make this an official one because I know not everyone has 2 devices, and my intention is not to make anyone feel like they need to or should. But if you do have 2 devices, it can be a lot easier to navigate, like reading through all the chat questions while you're, sorry, I keep doing that, to navigate through all the chat questions while you are you know, presenting material. So like I have my laptop here on the left and my iPad on the right. And it just, you know, it can just make your life a little bit easier so you're not constantly switching between windows while you're teaching. So I hope that was helpful. If you have your own tips, please include them in the comments so that we can help each other. I know this is not an exhaustive list, but I thought this might be a good starting point if you're someone who's not used to teaching on Zoom, or just, you know, wants to see like how other instructors are doing things. All right, thank you.